The town was small enough that silence had its own rhythm. Mornings began with the sound of waves brushing against the pier, and evenings ended with the smell of salt clinging to the air. I moved there for peace, or maybe just to hide from the noise I carried inside, the kind that doesn't fade with distance. Her house stood across the narrow street, painted a faded blue that matched the sea on overcast days. The windows faced mine, close enough that if I leaned out, I could see her plants lined neatly on the sill: rosemary, lavender, and a small cactus that always seemed to survive everything. I didn't know her name for weeks, only the way she moved. Calm, measured, like someone who had already fought her battles and learned not to make a sound. Every morning, she stepped onto her porch with a cup of black coffee. No sugar, no cream, just as I'd learned to take mine. Sometimes I wondered if peace had a flavor. Maybe it tasted like that. I'd nod when our eyes met. She'd give a small, polite smile, the kind people wear when they've forgotten how to start a conversation. Still, there was something about the way she looked at the sea, as if it remembered a part of her that she couldn't. The first time we spoke was because of the storm. The wind had knocked over her garden fence, and the rain had turned the small street into a shallow river. I ran over without thinking, barefoot, holding her scattered pots before they floated away. She was standing there, hair damp, cardigan clinging to her shoulders, trying to save her plants one by one. "Looks like the ocean wants your rosemary," I said. She laughed, soft, tired, but real. "Then it can have it. I'll just grow another." We worked quietly after that. I didn't ask how long she'd lived there. She didn't ask why I had. The silence between us wasn't heavy, it was understanding. When the storm ended, she made tea. Not coffee. Tea with mint and honey, served in mismatched cups. Her house smelled like the kind of calm that takes years to earn. "You're new here," she said, setting the cup in front of me. 2 months, I replied. She nodded. "It takes less time for the sea to learn your name, but it'll still keep its secrets." That night, the town lost power. From my window, I saw the glow of a single candle in hers. She was reading. The flame flickered across her face, tracing quiet lines of tiredness and grace. I didn't realize I'd been staring until she looked up. For a moment, neither of us looked away. The world outside was dark, but the distance between our windows wasn't. The next morning, she left a mug of black coffee on my porch. No note, just warmth and porcelain. After that, it became a ritual. Her coffee, my tea, exchanged without words. Days blurred into weeks, and though we never spoke much, it began to feel like something unspoken lived in the space between our windows. Something gentle, something that didn't need to be named. I didn't know her story yet. Didn't know what she'd lost or why her eyes carried the kind of sadness that wasn't fresh but worn, like sea glass. All I knew was that every morning I'd wait for the sound of her door opening, and if it didn't come, the day felt incomplete. And one morning, it didn't. The morning she didn't come out, the air felt wrong. Too still, too quiet, as if the sea itself had paused to listen. I waited, cup in hand, eyes on that faded blue door across the street. Nothing. No footsteps. No clinking cup. No soft hum of her morning radio. I told myself she was just sleeping in. Or maybe she'd gone for a walk early, before sunrise. Still, I stayed by the window longer than I should have, pretending to read, the page trembling between my fingers. By noon, her curtains were still closed. The coffee cup I'd left on her porch sat untouched. That's when I crossed the street. Her garden smelled like rain and rosemary, like it always did, but something about it felt lonelier, as if it were waiting, too. I knocked softly. Once. Twice. After a long pause, the door opened. She stood there wrapped in an oversized sweater, her hair undone, eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept. For a moment, I thought maybe she was sick. But then she smiled, a fragile, apologetic curve of her lips. "Sorry," she said quietly. "Didn't mean to break the routine. I was just making sure you were okay." "I'm not sure I am today," she admitted. "But I will be." Her honesty caught me off guard. Not the words, but how simply she said them. No dramatics. Just truth, plain and heavy. I nodded, unsure if I should stay or leave. But she stepped aside. "You can come in if you'd like." Inside, the air was warm but still. A record was spinning softly, some old jazz tune playing from a crackling speaker. There were framed photos, black and white ones of a younger woman who looked just like her, standing beside a man who didn't anymore. Maybe her husband. Maybe her past. We sat at her small wooden table. She made tea again, not coffee. This time, she spoke before I could. Today would have been my anniversary, she said. He's gone now. Cancer. 3 years. She looked down, tracing the rim of her cup. Some days it feels like forever ago. Other days, it still hurts to breathe. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. Sometimes silence is kinder than comfort. She gave a soft laugh, half embarrassed. I don't usually tell people things like that. But you sit like you understand. I think everyone's lost something, I said. Just not everyone admits it. We talked until the light outside turned gold. The conversation wasn't about love or loss, not directly. We talked about small things. The way the sea changes color with the wind. How she still listens to vinyl because it forces you to stay. How the town feels too big at night, even though it's so small. When I left, she smiled again, tired but genuine. Tomorrow, black coffee, she said softly. I'll bring it this time. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her voice lingered, her sadness echoing inside me. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. The kind that makes your chest ache, not because it's tragic, but because it's real. Days turned into a quiet rhythm again. Morning coffee, evening conversations. Sometimes she'd invite me to fix something around the house, a leaky pipe, a jammed window, always thanking me with tea and soft music. And I'd stay longer than necessary, pretending to help, really just wanting to hear her talk about the world in that gentle way she did. Once, when she was laughing about something small, a cat stealing her sandwich at the pier, she looked up at me, and for a moment, everything inside me stilled. I saw not just the woman she was, but the girl she must have been, the one who still believed the world could surprise her. That look stayed with me. That night, I dreamed of her, not in the way people dream of love, but in the way you remember warmth when you've been cold too long. It scared me a little, because for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. And I didn't know if she felt it too, or if she was simply offering kindness to a boy who didn't yet understand what it cost her to care again. It started with small things, a touch that lingered too long, a pause before goodbye. Nothing intentional, just moments that felt like they were waiting for something to happen. Every evening, I'd find myself walking slower past her house, pretending to check my phone or tie a shoelace, until I saw her silhouette by the window. Sometimes she'd wave. Sometimes she'd just look, that soft, knowing look that said I see you, even when you don't know what to say. One night, she called me over while I was passing by. The lights flickering again, she said, smiling, holding up a loose bulb. I fixed it in a few seconds, but didn't leave right away. She poured wine, not tea this time. For your service, she joked. We sat on her porch, the sea breeze cool against the warmth of the lights behind us. The sky was ink blue, and you could hear the soft hum of waves hitting the shore. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was full, like the space between two breaths. You ever feel like you're just waiting? She asked suddenly. For what? I don't know. For life to mean something again. For the noise in your head to stop. I hesitated before answering. Maybe that's why people find each other, to stop waiting alone. She looked at me then, eyes tired but shining. That's too wise for someone your age. Or maybe just too lonely, I said quietly. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Don't be lonely at 24. You've got the whole world still waiting for you. I think sometimes the world's overrated, I murmured. People make it worth it. Just certain ones. Her expression changed. Not surprise, not rejection, just a stillness. Like she was afraid to move in case the moment broke. She turned her gaze toward the sea. I shouldn't enjoy your company this much, she said softly. It's not fair to you. I don't think fairness has much to do with it. We didn't look at each other after that. The air felt heavy, but not in a bad way. Just full of unspoken things. When I finally stood to leave, she touched my wrist, gentle, unsure. Stay for another minute, she whispered. So I did. That minute became 10. 10 became an hour. She told me stories about the old pier that used to stretch farther out before the storm took it, about the summer markets where she'd sell paintings when her husband was still alive, about the way grief doesn't really leave, it just learns to sit quietly beside you. At one point, I asked, do you ever miss him? Her eyes softened. Every day, but not in the way you think. I miss who I was with him. The version of me that laughed easily. She looked at me then, like she was trying to find that version again, in my face, my words, maybe even my silence. The porch light flickered once more, then steadied. And I felt something shift between us, small, invisible, but real. When I finally walked home that night, the air was cooler, my heart too loud. I kept replaying her words, her smile, the touch on my wrist. I knew I was falling, not in some wild, cinematic way, but in quiet steps, the kind that sneak up on you until you realize you've already crossed a line you can't unwalk. The next morning, her cup was already on the porch before I even woke up. Steam rising, waiting, and beside it, a note in her handwriting, small, careful, almost shy. For when the world feels too heavy, you can always knock. I stared at it for a long time, knowing I'd keep that note forever. Even if someday I had to pretend it never meant what it did. It was one of those evenings when the sea seemed restless, waves hitting the rocks harder than usual, as if the tide itself couldn't keep still. The town was quiet, windows dim, the smell of salt heavy in the air. I hadn't planned to see her that night. I just found myself standing outside her porch, hands in my pockets, staring at the faint glow behind her curtains. She opened the door before I could knock. "I thought it was you," she said softly. "You walk heavy when you're lost in thought." I smiled, embarrassed. "Didn't mean to bother you." "You don't," she said. "Come in." Inside, the room was lit by a single lamp. Her sketches were scattered across the table, half-finished drawings of the coastline, all touched with that quiet sadness she never tried to hide. She was wearing an oversized sweater, sleeves pulled past her wrists, hair slightly damp like she'd just washed the day off her shoulders. "You've been painting again," I said. "Trying to," she replied. "Some days the brush feels too heavy." I wanted to tell her that everything she touched already carried warmth, even when she didn't mean it to. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned against the table, close enough to see the faint smudge of graphite on her fingers. "Want to take a walk?" She looked surprised. "Now?" "Yeah, before the rain starts." We walked down the narrow path that led to the beach. The air was thick, sky low with clouds. Her arm brushed mine once, not by accident, but not on purpose either. "Do you ever wish you could start over?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "All the time. But then I'd lose everything that taught me who I am." "And who are you now?" She exhaled slowly. "Someone learning to be okay with being seen again." That hit deeper than I expected. We stopped by the old pier, the one she told me about, the one the storm had partly taken. The wooden planks creaked beneath our steps. The sound of waves echoed below like a heartbeat. "I used to come here with him," she said after a pause. "We'd sit for hours, saying nothing. I didn't realize silence could be so different with someone else." I turned to her. "And now?" She looked at me, really looked, her eyes tired, raw, alive. "Now it's not silence anymore. It's something I don't have a name for." The wind picked up, blowing strands of hair across her face. I wanted to reach out, tuck them behind her ear, but I didn't. The distance between us was small, but full of something fragile, something that could vanish if either of us moved too quickly. "Do you ever think about leaving?" I asked quietly. "Leaving this town?" "Yeah." She laughed, soft and short. "And go where?" "The world feels too loud now. Here, at least, the quiet doesn't ask too many questions." We stood there, side by side, staring at the horizon that blurred between sea and sky. I could feel her pulse in the air, steady, close, but unreachable. When the first drops of rain began to fall, she didn't move. Neither did I. I said her name once, gently. She turned, eyes glistening. "Don't," she whispered. "Not tonight." The rain fell harder, soaking through our clothes. She took a shaky breath and said, "You make it hard to forget how it feels to be wanted." My heart stumbled. "And you make it hard to remember that I shouldn't." We stood there in the downpour, not kissing, not touching, just suspended in that impossible almost. Her hand trembled once, lifted halfway, then dropped. "Go home," she said, voice breaking softly. "Before we make a mistake we can't unmake." I wanted to say that maybe it wouldn't be a mistake, but her eyes stopped me. I turned away, walked a few steps, then looked back. She was still standing there, soaked, still, beautiful in that unguarded way she tried to hide. Lightning flashed behind her, just enough to catch the faint curve of a smile that wasn't really a smile. More like a goodbye that hadn't found its words yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the rain outside my window was the same rhythm as the one I'd felt standing beside her, steady, endless, and full of something that refused to fade. For 3 days, her window stayed dark. No soft lamplight in the evenings. No sound of her music drifting through the open air. No coffee cup waiting on her porch in the mornings. At first, I told myself she was just busy, maybe gone to visit a friend, maybe painting again. But the longer her silence stretched, the heavier it became. Silence can be peaceful. But this one felt like absence. On the 4th day, I finally walked to her door. The steps creaked like they always did, but even that sound felt hollow now. I knocked once, then twice. Nothing. I found a note slipped under my own door later that afternoon. Folded, written in her familiar script. Soft, looping, careful. I've gone to the city for a while. Needed space to think. Please don't worry. No signature. No return date. Just that. That night, I sat by my window, staring at the faint reflection of my own face in the glass. Across the narrow street, hers stayed empty, curtains drawn, porch light off, a quiet I didn't know how to fill. Days passed. I tried to distract myself. Work, runs by the shore, pretending to forget the sound of her voice. But everything reminded me of her. The shape of her mug left in my sink, the faint scent of salt and jasmine that still clung to my sweater. I started keeping my phone closer, checking it too often, as if the sea breeze might carry her message back. Then, one morning, she returned. I saw her car first, parked crookedly, still dusty from the road. And then her, stepping out slowly, wearing sunglasses even though the sky was gray. She looked thinner, like she'd been away for years, not weeks. I didn't go to her right away. She saw me, gave a small wave. It wasn't a greeting, it was permission to approach, or maybe to keep my distance. Later that evening, she knocked on my door. The sound was soft, hesitant, like she wasn't sure she had the right anymore. When I opened it, she smiled faintly. "I brought you something," she said, holding out a sketchbook. Inside were drawings, the town, the shore, the pier, and me. Small, in the corner of one page, standing beside the sea. I looked up at her, unsure what to say. "I kept drawing," she whispered. "You were easier to remember than to forget." There was something raw in her voice, like confession and apology tangled together. "You could have told me," I said quietly, "that you were leaving." I didn't want to explain something I didn't understand yet. And now, she hesitated. Now I think I was trying to unfeel something that never asked to be felt. We stood there, the doorway between us, the weight of everything unsaid pressing close. Then she looked away, eyes wet but steady. "There's something you should know," she said. "My husband, he didn't just leave. He's still here, the other side of town. We never really ended, just paused. Like we forgot how to be anything to each other." It felt like a quiet punch to the chest, not betrayal, not anger, just the slow ache of understanding. "You still love him," I said. "I don't know what love is anymore," she whispered. "But I know I can't let you carry something that was never yours to hold." For a long time, I didn't speak. The air between us was heavy, like the sea before a storm. Finally, I said, "You don't get to decide what I feel." "I know," she said, voice trembling. "And that's why it hurts." She stepped back then, giving a small nod. "You should hate me a little. It'll make it easier." And before I could answer, she turned and walked away. Down the street, her figure growing smaller, her outline blurring in the fog that had begun to roll in. That night, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. 2 weeks passed before I saw her again. The town felt heavier in her absence, the streets too still, the waves quieter somehow. I tried to convince myself that what happened was for the best, that maybe she had been right. Maybe some connections only existed to teach you how to let go. But then one evening, as I was walking back from the shore, I saw her sitting alone on the bench near the lighthouse. The sky was a soft bruise of fading orange and violet. The tide was low, pulling the sea away in slow breaths. She looked smaller there, wrapped in a coat that was too big, her hair tied up carelessly. For a moment, I almost kept walking. But she turned her head, and even from a distance, I knew she'd been waiting. "I thought you'd gone again," I said when I finally reached her. "I almost did," she replied quietly. "But I came here instead." "Why?" "Because I didn't want the last thing between us to be silence." The wind was cold, but her voice was steady. We sat without speaking for a while, just watching the horizon where the sea met the sky, that thin line that looked like it could vanish if you blinked. Finally, she said, I told him. It took me a second to realize who she meant. He knows about us? She nodded, eyes fixed on the ocean. Not everything, just enough. And he wasn't angry, she said softly. That almost made it worse. He just looked tired, like he'd been waiting for me to say it for years. Her hands were trembling slightly. She folded them together to hide it. I think I stayed too long in a life that stopped belonging to me, she whispered. But leaving it doesn't mean I'm ready to start another one. I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice to stay even. She turned to me then, eyes glistening under the dim light from the lighthouse behind us. You deserve more than what I can give, she said. I've heard enough people trying to feel whole again. I didn't ask you for more, I said. But you feel like more, she whispered. There it was, the thing we'd been circling around for months. Not love, not lust, but that quiet, impossible need to be understood by someone who never tried to fix you. The sea roared softly in the background, the air smelling of salt and regret. I think I was falling in love with the way you looked at me, she said. Like I was still capable of beginning again. You are, I said. You just don't believe it yet. She smiled faintly, tears catching in the corner of her eyes. And you? She asked. What do you believe? I swallowed hard. That maybe I was meant to find you, not to keep you, but to remind you you're still alive. That broke something in both of us. She looked down, exhaled shakily. Don't say that, she whispered. You make it sound like goodbye. Maybe it is, I said. Or maybe it's the first honest thing we've ever said. Her hand brushed mine, not by mistake, not hesitation this time. A touch that carried everything we couldn't speak out loud. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But instead, she just smiled, small, heartbreaking real. I'll miss this, she said softly. Whatever this was. I nodded. So will I. The lighthouse turned once, its light sweeping across us like a quiet blessing, here and gone in a heartbeat. Then she stood. Take care of yourself, she said. And try not to wait for people who belong to the sea. Before I could answer, she kissed my cheek, warm, trembling, and walked away, her steps slow, sure, final. I watched her disappear down the path, the sound of her shoes fading against the wind. When I finally turned toward the ocean again, the light from the lighthouse circled back, and for just a second, it felt like it was pointing at the space she'd left behind that a year passed quietly. The sea still sounded the same, restless in the mornings, gentle at dusk. The town, too, hadn't changed much. The same fishermen waved from the docks. The same children ran barefoot down the street after school. But for me, everything carried a softer kind of echo now. Her house across the lane stood empty for months after she left. The curtains stayed open, and every time I passed by, I found myself slowing down, as if expecting her shadow to appear by the window again. Eventually, someone new moved in, a young couple with a baby. They repainted the porch a brighter color, filled the yard with potted flowers. It didn't make me sad. If anything, it felt like the house was breathing again, like it had been waiting for laughter to come back. I never saw her again after that night at the lighthouse. But sometimes, I'd find traces of her still, a sketch tucked in an old book she'd once lent me, the faint scent of jasmine when the sea breeze shifted, or the sight of someone standing by the pier at sunset, and my heart would stutter before reason caught up. I went back to work, started writing again. Not about her, not directly, but everything I wrote carried her shape somehow. The pauses, the quiet, the ache between words. She taught me that silence can hold more truth than anything we dare to say out loud. One evening, nearly a year later, I got a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable, that same looping calm. It came from another town, a few hours north along the coast. I'm painting again, she wrote. The sea looks different here, lighter somehow. Maybe I'm different, too. I hope you are. I hope the world feels a little less heavy now. At the bottom, she added, thank you for being kind when I didn't know how to be. No address. No signature. Just that. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't need to. Some goodbyes don't require words. They just need to be remembered softly. Now, on most evenings, I walk to the pier before sunset. The same one we stood on that night. I sit there with a cup of coffee, listening to the water breathe. Sometimes I talk to her, not out loud, just in the quiet of my thoughts. I tell her about the weather, the new neighbors, the way the sea looks different every day but never really changes. And sometimes, I swear I can almost hear her voice in the wind, calm, amused, alive. Maybe that's what love really is, not the staying, but the remembering. Not what lasts, but what softens us when it's gone. One evening, the young woman who moved into her house stopped by the pier. She was holding her baby, smiling. "You always come here at the same time," she said. "It's a good hour," I replied. "The light's beautiful," she said, watching the horizon. "Feels like the world's forgiving itself a little." I smiled. "Yeah, something like that." After she left, I sat there a while longer. The tide was pulling out, slow and steady. Across the water, the sky was streaked with gold. And in that fragile, fading light, I felt it again. Not longing, not loss, but peace. She had been right all along. The quiet doesn't ask too many questions. It just holds you until you're ready to breathe again. I stood, brushed the sand off my coat, and took one last look at the horizon. A soft wind rose, warm against my face, carrying that same scent of salt and jasmine. I closed my eyes, smiled, and whispered, "Wherever you are, I hope the light found you." And for the first time in a long time, I knew that it finally had found me too.